Today, we're diving into something that feels uniquely modern, this cognitive crisis that's hitting adults right in their 40s. For so many people, this is the decade where everything just collides, right? You've got peak career ambition, you might be parenting teenagers, and at the same time, caring for aging parents. We're going to break down how our nonstop digital world is completely changing the game.
So let me just start with a question that might hit a little too close to home, especially if you're in this age bracket. Do you ever feel like you're just completely swamped? Like the demands, the notifications, the obligations, they never, ever stop? Well, if you're nodding along, trust me, you are not alone.
To get a sense of the sheer scale of this, just think about this one number, 200. That's the average number of small decisions an adult in their 40s makes every single day, just on their phone. We're talking everything from which work email do I tackle first to does this family text need a reply right now?
And what's the result of all that constant digital triage? Well, it's pretty staggering. A full 75%, that's 3 out of every 4 adults between 40 and 49, say they feel totally overwhelmed by the amount of information and communication they have to deal with every day.
And if you're wondering where all this overload is coming from, look no further. This age group spends, on average, 3.5 hours a day on their smartphones. And get this, that doesn't even count the time spent staring at a computer for work. It's just become the constant background hum of midlife.
So you put all this data together, and what do you get? Well, our source material has a name for it, the cognitive crisis. And it's basically a 3-part problem where this constant digital flood is directly fueling overload, creating anxiety, and maybe, worst of all, messing with our sleep. You know, at the very heart of this is something called decision fatigue. The best way to think about it is that your ability to make good choices is like a muscle. And after you've made those 200+ tiny digital decisions all day, that muscle is just fried. By the evening, even a simple choice like what to have for dinner can feel monumental, and the quality of your actually important decisions really starts to take a hit.
And the anxiety that comes with this decade? It's not really about FOMO, the fear of missing out you see with younger folks. No, it's the fear of dropping the ball. It's that constant, nagging worry that you're going to miss a critical email from your boss or forget a promise to your kid. And that fear is what drives the compulsive checking and that persistent, low-level stress that just never seems to switch off.
This all feeds into a really nasty downward spiral. It usually starts with scrolling on the phone late at night, which we all know wrecks our sleep. That leads to being tired all the time, which means your performance at work and your patience at home starts to dip. Of course, that just ramps up your stress, and how do we cope? Maybe more caffeine, maybe a drink to unwind, which, you guessed it, only messes up our sleep even more. It's a vicious cycle, and our devices are powering the whole thing.
And here's what's so critical to understand. These digital pressures aren't happening in some kind of bubble. They're landing right on top of the existing vulnerabilities of midlife. Things like rising rates of depression, or for women, the huge hormonal shifts of perimenopause. It just makes an already tough time that much harder.
But here's the thing. This cognitive crisis doesn't hit everyone the same way. Not at all. In fact, gender plays a huge role in shaping the very specific kinds of pressures that men and women are dealing with in their 40s.
And the contrast here is really striking. For a lot of women, their 40s are the absolute peak of emotional labor. We're talking coordinating care for aging parents, managing schedules for kids, keeping the whole household running, and it's all happening on their phone. It creates this massive, invisible mental load. For men, on the other hand, the pressure is often more tied to their careers, this expectation to be constantly available, which can actually lead to real isolation as quick digital check-ins start to replace deeper face-to-face connections.
And these differences don't just stop at gender. Where you live actually changes the whole experience. I mean, the digital demands on a 45-year-old living in a packed city are going to be wildly different from someone living in a more rural area.
So people in cities are facing what the source calls maximum digital noise. It's a total sensory overload from their devices and their environment. But out in the country, you might have spotty cell service, which can weirdly be a good thing. It creates natural boundaries. The trade-off, though, is that while rural communities might have stronger face-to-face ties, they often have way less access to mental health care if and when they need it.
Okay, so we've looked at the data, the causes, and how it all changes based on gender and where you live. So what's the big takeaway? What's the bottom line? Well, it really boils down to this fundamental imbalance in our lives today.
If you had to sum up the core feeling for so many people in this decade, it's this: too much noise, too little peace. It's that feeling of just drowning in a sea of digital pings and obligations, desperately trying to find one single moment of quiet.
And that really gets to the great irony of our digital lives, doesn't it? These phones, these tools that promise to help us manage all the complexity, they've actually just enabled the complexity to explode way beyond what our brains can handle. We've ended up being always on, but the price we pay is that we're never fully present. We just skim the surface of hundreds of interactions without having any real depth in any of them.
And all of that leads to the final, really powerful thought from this chapter. The real challenge here isn't just about managing our screen time a little better, it's about a much bigger, much more important task. Figuring out how to get through this incredibly demanding decade with our relationships and our own well-being still intact. And so the question this leaves us with is, what's your strategy for finding a little bit of peace in all that noise?